Welcome to Through Immigrant Eyes, a podcast created by the Center for Immigrant Progress in hopes of amplifying and uplifting our voices as immigrants. As a grassroots organization, we believe that in order to empower our community, we must first listen to what they have to say. My name is Sandra Diaz, and I will be your host for this episode. Today, we are joined by Jesus Ruiz, Dean of the College of Lake County's Lakeshore Campus, to talk about living in the intersecting identities of undocumented and queer, and how education is a valuable tool to achieve the American dream.
Welcome in, Jesus.
Good morning. Thank you so much for welcoming and the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you, Jesus. We're excited to have you here. I have a lot I want to talk to you about. I think we can pretty much just share a little bit about your story and also your career. So it's probably going to be a long one. Let's start with early life. If there's anything you'd like to share or you feel comfortable sharing, sort of like your growing up in, and remind me, are you a Waukegan native?
Well, I would like to think of myself as a Waukegan native. I was actually born in Mexico. I'm originally from Guanajuato, Mexico, and I was born and raised there till I was about 10 years old. And then I moved to the U.S.
Okay. So yeah, do you have any maybe like fond memories of living in Mexico and sort of the things that also led to, deciding to make the move to Waukegan?
Of course. Back in the 80s, I was growing up in Mexico, and I actually attended school. I did preschool in Mexico, and I went up to the fourth grade back in Guanajuato. But my family had been separated since birth, actually, since I was born. My dad would come and work in the U.S. as an undocumented laborer. And he was very young when he started coming to the U.S. He was 16 years old when he immigrated. And he would come in and out of the country to go visit his family. I was born in the 80s. My dad would be a figure that I would see hopefully once a year, sometimes once every 2 years, because of the difficulty of going back and coming back to the U.S. to work. And so we lived a very comfortable life in Mexico. My mom, my two brothers, and I would receive money every week from my dad, who was working in the U.S. So we had a pretty comfortable life. But my dad was an absent figure in our lives for 10 years of my life. And so it came to a point where my mother said, my family is not complete. We need to reunite. We need to have my children start loving their father as their father, and end our family separation. So she decided that we needed to come together, and the decision was made in the early 90s to come to the U.S. with my dad.
Right. I think also you speak on a few topics that are very common in the immigrant experience. Family separation is definitely a big one, whether it's because of the lack of economic opportunity, we're in your place of origin, and having to come to the U.S. to, live, like you said, live a comfortable life, but at the cost of, growing apart from your family. Mm-hmm. So I think that's definitely a reason why people realize that there's definitely an importance in being all united and together. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to ask about why Waukegan? Is there a specific reason how you all decided on moving all the way north to Illinois, going through a few states to get there?
The one that started the family move to Illinois was my grandfather. My grandfather in the 70s found a job in the suburbs of Chicago for a golf club, a very renowned golf club. And he was kind of the helping hand that began bringing the rest of my family to the U.S. Once he was established here, he would pay for my uncles and even my dad to join him. And they all got a job in this golf club, where they received food and housing. And so it was very easy for them to make the move. Once they got to the U.S. with a recommendation from my grandfather, they would get a job at this club and again, get housing and food paid for. So, basically they were working, they would get a paycheck, and most of their paycheck would go back to sustain their families in Mexico. But as the family decided to come together, that was no longer an option. My dad was living with a bunch of other guys in this clubhouse, and he, of course, could not have his family with him. And so we decided that, he needed to find a place to live. But this golf club is located in the North Shore, a very wealthy community where the workers work, but they cannot afford to live there.
Right.
Rents are super expensive. Homes, purchasing a home there is unimaginable for a lot of us and a lot of workers. So they had to find an affordable place to live, and the affordable place to live was Waukegan, North Chicago, and Zion. Those were the places where these workers could afford to purchase a home and begin, their rebuilding their lives with their families. And so I think it's still the case today. My experience was back in the early 90s, but it's still the case today where a lot of our people are working in the North Shore, but they can't afford to live in those communities. And so they are in search of affordable housing. Waukegan, Zion, and North Chicago offer that opportunity.
Right. And I know that most of your career has been in these areas where you ended up growing up after moving here when you were 10. Can you share with us also your career track? So sort of why did you start working in what you do today?
Sure.
And how did you get to Dean of the Lakeshore Campus, which, if I'm not wrong, you're the first Latino Dean of the College of Lake County?
That's correct. Yes. So I'm a Waukegan high school graduate. I'm a product of Waukegan School District. I began my educational career in Waukegan at West Elementary School, which is now Robert E. Abbott Middle School, right on Washington and Buttrick. And I began there in a bilingual program, which really helped me. And, there's people out there that don't really agree with me that the bilingual program is an asset, but it was really an asset for me. I was able to develop my English learning skills through the bilingual program without sacrificing my academic ability, because many times you are learning in English only, but how do you learn history when you don't know the language? How do you learn, math and literature when you don't know the language? And so your grades start sliding and you become discouraged as a Latino student. In the bilingual program, I was educated in both English and Spanish. So I got the benefit of learning the language, and I had the benefit of actually showing my teachers and showing my peers that I was smart. I felt smart because I was learning in my own language, and I was able to express and do homework in my own language. So it really helped me solidify my self-trust or my ability to learn and be successful in this new country. I graduated out of Waukegan High School I was a millennial class, year 2000. And I had been doing some work in the sciences before that. I got a scholarship from the American Chemical Society to do basic medical research at Rosalind Franklin University. And I was doing research with a wonderful mentor, Hector Rasgado, which is, again, another staple of our community. And I was with him for 2 years before graduating high school. We got a paper published before graduating high school on cell volume regulation, and we were doing a lot of good work in the sciences. I wanted to become a doctor, and so he helped me, in a few aspects to kind of solidify my decision that I wanted to go into medicine. Once I graduated high school, I said to myself, well, I have a really good GPA, top 2% of my class. I have published paper. I have it made. I'm really going to do well. Right. I had two universities that I really wanted to attend, Loyola University and Northwestern. I wanted to attend Loyola for a couple of reasons, but one of my personal reasons is I remember driving through Loyola when I was younger, when I was still in middle school, and I was driving with one of my uncles, and I told him, this is a beautiful university. This is where I want to come when I grow up. And I remember my uncle telling me, Mijo, this is a school for white kids. This is a school for white kids with money. Mm-hmm. And that kind of solidified my view that that's where I needed to go and show him that I could make it too, that I was as good as the white kids with money. And as I was going through the application process back in those days, they were all paper applications. You had to fill them out, write an essay, all of these things. And I got the packet from Loyola and the packet from Northwestern. Northwestern's application was about 25 pages long. Loyola sent me a one-page document that said you are pre-admitted, just sign the dotted line and you're in. I chose Loyola.
Right, the decision was easier.
The decision was made. I attended Loyola. My first semester, I kind of hit the wall. I was coming out of Waukegan High School, which was vastly underfunded back in those days. And here I was in Loyola, competing with kids that were graduating from New Trier, from Libertyville, from all these North Shore high schools that were very well funded, and they were very well prepared to do well at a university like Loyola. I really hit the wall my first semester, and all of those fears and feelings of, am I good enough to be here? Is the sacrifice my family doing for me worth it? Or am I just wasting their time and money? Came back and started haunting me. My first chemistry exam, I got a D. So I was very discouraged. I took my paper, which was filled with red marks, and I went to my professor's office, and I wanted to talk to them and see what advice they could give me. I met with my professor, and the first thing she did is take my paper, and she looked through it and said, Jose, you should really think about changing majors. I don't think chemistry is for you. Now, this professor, she was a white woman, and first of all, she got my name wrong. Second of all, she knew nothing of me. She didn't know that I had been doing research in medical school. She didn't know that I was 2% of my class. She didn't know all these things, but immediately said, you need to look for another major.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that really marked my experience at Loyola. I really didn't find the support from faculty or other counselors or anybody else. For a first-generation Latino student from Waukegan, it was a really hard environment to navigate. I decided that, yes, I was going to change my major. I went from chemistry to biology, which was a lot easier for me. And I finally graduated. I graduated not with a 4.0 or anything like that, but I thought I could make it happen into medical school. I graduated and was ready to apply to medical school when I realized that I needed an exam that nobody had talked to me about. I needed to have taken the MCAT, the Medical College Admissions Test, before graduation to be ready to apply. And no one ever talked to me about the MCAT at Loyola. I mean, they never mentioned it. They never said, this is what you need to do in order to apply to medical school. And so I had graduated and I didn't have the ability to apply. I started looking at options, and taking a course to prepare for the MCAT back in those days was about $3,000 to $5,000. I didn't have the money. My family didn't have the money. So I took a year off and decided to start working. When I started working, my first job was in Libertyville, USG Corporation, as a science and technology technician. And that was fun. We were working with cement, and I was working with fiberglass, cement, and structural engineering, which was awesome in the beginning. But later on, I realized that even though I had a college degree, I was doing the same kind of job that my dad didn't want me to do when I was growing up. And so I found another position through S.E. Johnson & Son. I was a toxicology assistant. It was an office job, which was something that I had aspired of having. But I was the only Latino working there. I was the only one in that department that had a Latino name, that listened to Mexican music, that really wanted to do something for his community. And it was an all-white environment. I didn't feel very comfortable. I realized that all the work we were doing was for a private company that was looking for profits as their number one issue. Mm-hmm. So I started looking for other alternatives. besides the commute, which was a little long, I really wanted to make an impact at home. I wanted to give back. And so the Lake County Health Department opened its doors, and they allowed me to come in as a research associate working on a federal grant that was tackling teen pregnancy prevention. And so that was the start of my public service. And we were working in the communities of North Chicago, Waukegan, and Zion to teach young adults, young children, and teenagers about pregnancy prevention and how to stay safe and how to prevent it, how to deal with it if you are pregnant, all of those things. They really did an amazing job introducing me to what a community is supposed to look like, to the kind of work that you do to actually make an impact on the people you care about. And in the health department, I made some really amazing friends. I met people that really changed my life. Among them, people that showed me how important community connections are for all of us. And so out of there, one of my dear friends, Carolina Herrera, said, you should do a master's in higher education. And here's this great program that, is doing it for free. I think you would be a great candidate. I got a master's in higher education. And as I did that, I realized that if I really wanted to make an impact, I wanted to go into education. Because of all the things that other communities had, the thing that was missing in my community was the educational piece. We needed to be educated in order to be listened to. We needed to be educated in order to move forward economically. And we needed to be educated in order to provide our future generations with a better future. As you realize that money is not everything, you start realizing that the future you want to give your children is not a future where you are sacrificing your mental health and your body for a wage that is not going to secure you a safe future as you get older. And so education was my main focus. I wanted to make sure that everyone had the same access I did, and that I made the path a little easier for those coming after me. I moved from the health department to Rosalind Franklin University, and my passion grew as I got experience at Rosalind, at the fact that they were in a mostly minority community, North Chicago, mostly Latino, mostly African American, but the numbers did not reflect that. The numbers in their student body did not reflect that. I saw that it was nowhere. If you were looking for a Latino medical school student, it was very difficult to find them.
Right.
Until this day, Rosalind has not graduated a single person from North Chicago, a single student from North Chicago, which is, to me, a tragedy because they've been there for many years. And so I wanted to make a change. I began working with my lifetime mentor, Hector Rasgado, and a few other advocates at Rosalind, and we really strengthened the links to the community out of Rosalind. I was a community relations and special projects officer, and from there, I moved on to the director of service learning and community relations, which was awesome. But when I started, they were admitting 5 students of color into their medical school. When I left, they had admitted almost 30 students. And so that was a huge success. But I also realized that at that graduate level, when you are waiting for those students to come to medical school, you are missing the boat, because most of the Black and brown students are not making it to the graduate level. And so I realized that I needed to come down a notch from that graduate institution that was serving those students that succeeded into the sciences, to an institution that would serve them at an earlier age and could actually open up their pathways. And so that was College of Lake County. I was extremely excited when this position opened 5 years ago, and they were looking for someone to bring this campus back to life. Those of you that are from Waukegan, you will probably remember the Lakeshore Campus back in the 90s and early 2000s, and even later, as a staple of this community. But many times you would drive through it and you would not see any action. You would not even think that it was an open campus. And so I was excited to learn that the president, Dr. Larry Sadek, was now looking at Lakeshore as one of her priorities. We wanted to make it come back to life. And so I applied. I was competing with a lot of other applicants who had doctoral degrees. And so I really thought, my odds of getting it is minimum. I'm competing against all these doctors. I'm competing against people that have a lot more experience. But throughout the application process, I realized that my community was behind me. They attended my presentations, they attended the community forums, and they were there to say, Jesus is the best candidate. And so if there's anything you get out of this podcast is remember, as a young leader, as long as you have your community's back, your community has your back. And so that's how I made it to this position, Sandra.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of, the experiences that you had growing up, going through higher education, are what led you to look for these kinds of positions and make those connections with your community. So I applaud you for all the work you've done, and also applaud the community for choosing a great representative to bring the Lakeshore campus back to life. If I may ask, so I know we talked about, the topic of this podcast being also about the intersectionality between the queer and undocumented community. I know you've done work a lot, mostly in the Latino focused community, which also, considering the demographics in like Waukegan, that's also the highest percentage of immigrants. Can you share with me the importance that you see maybe intersecting, or like the importance in working in both movements for our community, for example?
Sure. And you're absolutely right. Most of my work has been looking at the immigrant community, looking at the community relations and the community empowerment. I never had a focus on the LGBTQ community, and that is a fault that I wish would have been different. As you know, I am a gay man, and I really did not come out, or I did not make that public until very much just the last couple of years. I grew up knowing who I was. I grew up knowing that I was gay, that I was different than my brothers, that I was different than many others in my family. But there were things that, I always placed on the balance. First of all, I came to this country as an undocumented child. And so that in itself was a disadvantage, right, in my eyes. And back in those days, I could see how coming out and how letting my family know and my community know that I was a gay man could act as another deterrent for me to get to where I needed to be. And so the intersectionality plays a huge role in the decisions we make as queer individuals and as community leaders. I remember talking to my friends about this when I was working at the health department. And one of them said, Jesus, if you come out and you tell these people that you are a gay man talking to other gay or to other kids about sexual health, what do you think they're going to think about you? And how are they going to see, how are the parents of these kids that you are talking about sexual health going to think, what are they going to think about you? Would your parents allow a gay man to come in and talk to you about sex? Was basically his question. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I said, you're absolutely right. They would probably not want a gay man talking to their kids about sex. And so you have to, as you're growing up, you have to think about the consequences of your decisions and how to better take advantage of the positions and the opportunities you have before you. And back in those days, I look back now and I wish it would have been different, mm-hmm. but I saw me coming out as a gay man as a deterrent to where I needed to be. I had a family who was extremely conservative. I grew up a Catholic, I grew up in a household where machismo was still the norm, where being a macho, being this heterosexual male was revered as the pinnacle of life. And for me to come to my dad and my mom and tell them, you're probably not going to get grandkids, you're probably not going to get a daughter-in-law from me, and I will live a completely different life than you expect me, brought with it some very major risks. We've all heard the stories of our youth, struggling with this. Many of them become homeless when they talk to their families about this. Many of them don't find the support that every queer child should have in the people they trust the most. And you add to that the fact that many of them are undocumented, and you create an environment of risk and an environment of danger, quite honestly. When you are undocumented and you are queer, the risk level for you increases tenfold. You don't know how to trust who you can trust with your undocumented status, and even worse, if there's people out there that would support you for being undocumented, would they still support you knowing that you were queer? I don't know. I didn't know back then. And so the intersectionality plays a huge role as to how safe we perceive we are, or how safe we are in reality. So for that reason, throughout my early formation years, I hid my identity, not only from the general public, but from my family itself. My parents didn't really, I'm assuming they knew. I'm assuming, mothers know, but I never really talked to them about this until I was married, and I was married in secret. I never told them I was going to get married. My husband and I got married without my family knowing. And I wish it would have been different. But after I was married, my husband said, I really cannot live being hidden from your family and your life, and I want to be part of it. And he really pushed me to come out and, confirm to my parents what they probably thought of, were thinking of as I was growing up. But it's really a difficult moment in life when you have to choose to be yourself and to come out as yourself, and to continue to get the support that you need as a young student or as a young individual to get to where you need to be.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you sharing that, especially because it's very real. The fact that, when you're living in the intersection of both identities, there is a real fear of rejection from both sides. In my experience, I also identify as queer, and having to deal with being undocumented, and then thinking that the people that can support me are my parents, but then realizing I can't be fully myself around them either. It was definitely a heavy toll to take, and something that I wish would have been different. And also being Latina, growing up Catholic, it all kind of ends up being, a challenge, and looking for support in either community is so important. And
Sandra, it's an incredibly heavy burden, physically and mentally.
Yeah.
Because as Latinos, we grow up thinking that family is everything, that you would do anything to make sure your family was safe, to make sure that they had what they needed. And yet, many times, our students, our youth come out and they find themselves in a place where everything they believed on was a mirage, where family turns against them, where parents are ashamed of them, where they have to break those lifelong bonds with their families in order to be who they are. And that is a true shame. And that is something that we as a community need to work on. If in reality, family is everything, we need to make sure that our queer students, that our LGBTQ students and youth have the support from their families no matter what. And then you move on to the spirituality piece. The fact that most of our Latino community, holds the Catholic faith. And yes, we've made some strides over the last few years, but how open is the church to welcoming our community, to making sure that we have a support in the church. And I don't know that we are where we need to be with that. So when you think about your family turning their backs on you, when you think about your church turning their backs on you, when you think about your community turning their backs on you, it's a dire consequence of being who you are. Mm-hmm. And you have to make the decision. It really takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of courage to do that as a young 14, 15, 16-year-old. And quite honestly, I mean, it took me to my 30s to be able to do that. And so when I see these individuals that have really gathered up the courage and said, you know what, I don't care. This is who I am, and you have to accept me. I really feel that they deserve every inch of support we can give them, because they've gathered up the courage to stand up to society, to stand up to family and say, I am not sacrificing who I am because of your comfort.
Thank you so much, Jesus. I think that has been healing for me personally to hear you talk about it. And of course, commending the people who have been able to come out both as undocumented and as queer and having to live in that intersectionality. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do want to ask you one more question, if you're comfortable sharing, about the reaction from your family when you did come out, and how you navigated that.
So the reaction from my family was mixed. I had my mother, when I told her, we both cried. And this is very emotional for me because I remember telling her in our kitchen, and she said, I kind of knew this. I really knew it. This is not new to me. I knew it. But what hurts is thinking back at the fact that you had to navigate this by yourself. Mm-hmm. And you shouldn't have to. You should have had to navigate this by yourself. I was here, and I wish you would have come out to me sooner. It was eye-opening because I really thought I was hiding it well. And my mother said, well, I knew it, but it wasn't my place to bring you out. It had to be your decision. And the fact that she recognized that I should not have navigated this by myself meant a lot. But it also made me think about her responsibility as a mother and whether that was something that she should have brought up as I was growing up. And I think it would have helped a lot if she would have come to me and asked me and confronted me about it. But I also have to say that my mother grew up in the same kind of household that many of our parents grew up, where, again, machismo and heterosexuality was the norm. My mother has a third grade education as well, and she's extremely Catholic. And so I can understand how difficult it was for her to accept it, but she did accept me, and she did provide me the support through my marriage and everything else. We have a wonderful relationship now. She's still my mother, and our relationship is even stronger than it was before. My father, he took a little bit more work. Even after I introduced him to my husband. There was friction among them. They have both outgrown it, and now they're good friends, and they see each other, and it's a wonderful relationship. But it did take a little bit more work. My brothers, as I talked to them, because I talked to them individually, I remember visiting their homes individually, all of this at the same time. I visited my brother Martin first, and then my other two siblings after that. But they said, "We knew it. I'm glad you're out, but are really taken aback at the fact that you got married without telling us. And so that was a surprise. But my close family, my brothers, my parents are very, very open now and accepting of my husband and I. My extended family, I think it's something that we don't talk about very much. They see me at family reunions. They see me at family celebrations with my husband. They, engage with us. They talk to us. But I think many times they rather see my husband as another friend that came to the party than another family member. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit annoying, but at the same time, it's not something that I let it affect me or affect the relationship I have with them. I understand that I have to meet them where they are, and the fact that they have welcomed my husband into my family, that they are accepting of us, is enough for me right now. I don't think I need their acceptance. I have the acceptance of my immediate family, and that's all I care about. The rest of them, I've had an aunt that said, I grew up with you, I love you, but you went crazy after a while. I'm like, well, being gay or being queer is not going crazy, aunt. And that's where some of that conversation has evolved. I have others who are extremely religious and who I know that I will never get their support. And I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with it. Mm-hmm. But I am very thankful that at least the people that I really care about, support me and understand me.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. I'm glad you were able to, heal that connection with your immediate family. I think that's something that obviously is always a fear that once this comes out, there's no repairing it. So
I have to mention, Sandra, that really played a role in my decision to keep it hidden as well.
Yeah.
Because I remember thinking, as I went off to college, I remember thinking, well, what if I come out now? I'm off to college. I spend most of the day at Loyola. Does it really matter? Mm-hmm. And then the fear set in and said, well, if you do this and your parents don't approve, where are you going to live?
Yeah.
Where's the support going to come from? And so you live in fear, and you live in fear not only for economic stability and having a roof over your head, but you also have this fear of, will they accept the person I love, and will they accept the person that I'm going to be bringing into the family? And if I'm homeless, what is it that I have to offer this person that I love as I move forward? And so I wish it would have been different, and I wish that I would have done more earlier in my activism for LGBTQ rights and everything else. But I needed to be in a position where I didn't need that support if it went sour.
Right.
And so I think that, a lot of the things that I could have done, I will still do, and I am still doing for the LGBTQ community. But I wish I would have done it sooner.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally agree with you with the fear, especially when it comes to housing and rejection from family. Mm-hmm. I don't think I started living in this identity fully until I was out of my parents' home, because I finally felt like, if you want to have a relationship with your daughter, you're going to have to, put in a little work too. So that's where our healing started. So absolutely. Totally relate to that. So I will definitely be following up with you to talk more on these topics. I think they're very needed. I think we need to dive deeper into them at a future time. So thank you so much for sharing your story and for taking the time to share with us, everything you've done, and also sharing a little more personal about your both coming outs.
Thank you.
And to close off, I do want to talk about one quote that I saw you had on the CLC website. The American dream is alive and well. Can you share with me what that means to you and why that's something that you still believe?
I did think about that quote when I came up with it and I was doing the interview. I think it's the New Sun where you saw it. But the American dream is something that has driven our community for generations. The idea that In America, you can be anyone you want to be. In America, you will find economic stability. In America, you will find justice. And, it's been a pillar that has been shaky throughout these years, and especially over the last decade here in this country. But I have to say that the American dream is something that I've been able to reach. And of course, everyone has their own idea of what the American dream is. But in my case, I've been able to be educated in this wonderful country. I've been able to gain the right to vote. I've been able to buy a home. I've been able to have a fulfilling job, a seat at the table at this wonderful organization. I was able to get married, bring my spouse from another country to America, and we have a wonderful family. That's much more than I could expect as an undocumented child coming to this country. And so for me, the American dream is well and alive. However, as someone that works in higher education, many times I hear that education doesn't pay, that it's no longer a safety net, that it's no longer a guarantee of success. And I have to say that I completely disagree with that. Education is something that no one can take away from you, that even as an undocumented student, you gain the skills and the knowledge that education and higher education can give you, and you can take it anywhere in the world. Worst case scenario, you go back to your country of origin, you have a degree from an American institution that is worth gold anywhere you go in the world. Mm-hmm. And so the American dream is there for us to grab. Yes, we have issues. Yes, we have a ton of problems that we have to solve as a society. But if you really focus, if you find the support that you need in this community, and you take advantage of the opportunities we provide in higher education, your dreams can come true. I'm not going to romanticize the fact that, a lot of times we say you work hard, you pick up yourself up, you dust yourself off and keep moving. We are a community that is always in survival mode. It's not easy. It's not a piece of cake to be able to navigate these systems, but it is possible. And you will be able to succeed in America if you are able to make the right decisions and you have the right kind of support and advice. And I can just tell you, for example, we have not turned down a single student for their inability to pay at CLC. We will find a way to help you pay for your education. And that is a commitment that many schools throughout the country are making. College may not be for everyone, but education is. If you want to go into a trade, be the best tradesman there is, but educate yourself in that trade. You don't have to get a bachelor's, you don't have to get a master's, but education is something that will never fail you. The American dream is tied to education.
Thank you so much for your time, Jesus. Thank you for sharing with us. And we hope to be hearing more from you. And I am sure we'll have another episode in the future.
Anytime, Sandra. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you.